Okay folks, this is a video I've wanted to do for quite a while. So this tip I'm about to give out to you is so red hot and sizzling that I only just discovered it myself. I don't know why I never thought of it before, but it seems that an awful lot of people do not do this. If you want to prolong the life of your paints, as we all do, because no one likes their paints drying up, meaning you have to buy more without actually using the entire pot, then there's a very simple thing you can do. Let's start with this new pot of Citadel paint, shall we? If you look there, the lid is not completely flat. It's not quite closing all the way. And the reason for that is, if we crack this bad boy open, look in there, there is paint, crusty old paint embedded inside the lid. Now a lot of people would look at that and just completely write it off and think, well, it's going to happen eventually. I'm just going to have to live with it, deal with the consequences. But there is actually something you can do about it. Because this is a paint pot, the inside of a paint pot is not designed so that paint will stick to it, oddly enough. And once you get that idea in your head, then you realise, wait a minute, I could probably just peel off all that paint that's crusting up the top of the paint bottle. So what tool could I possibly use for such an act? Well, you've got a couple of options. You can use a pointed stick. This one's obviously been well used for this particular purpose, and paint mixing and all kinds of stuff. Also, if you're very, very careful, you may want to use a knife. I find the knife is the most effective, but also potentially the most lethal. You could easily lose a finger doing this. But I'm going to show you with the knife, and if I do cut my finger off, I'll leave it in the video, so you can see what not to do. So, what I like to do, I like to push the pot beyond the little retaining thing there that keeps it open, just so I can grip it without having to hold the pot at the same time. I can just hold the lid. It's actually easier on paints where the lid has completely come off. That did used to happen with a lot of old ones. So I'm going to start jabbing the knife in there and just kind of poking in and then pulling away once it's in. And then you should see that after a couple of these, you should sufficiently loosen it that the whole thing will pretty much peel off in one or two goes. I think I've just got quite a significant chunk there. Sometimes it takes a while to get started, but then when you do, it's going to come off incredibly easily once we really get in there. Now you can see there's quite a big chunk now that I feel like I could probably grab with my finger and pull the whole thing out. So I'm going to put the knife to one side, and this is possibly the messiest part. Oh, look at that. See, word of warning folks, a little bit can just break off in your hands. So we're going to have to go back in there with the knife. But you can get the gist of it already, you can see what we're doing here. See, that could have been a finger crippling moment there. Could have taken my own finger out big time. Hopefully we've got a big enough chunk now that it'll just peel all the way out. Here we go. Nope, we got most of it. There's still a little bit lurking in there. So we're just going to poke under this and that should suffice. So let's stop the old knife rolling off the table there. There we go, that's pretty much all of it now. There's just tiny little pieces there, and a little bit there around the top. And there we go. Nice and clean. So, hopefully, when we try to close this paint now, once we push it over there again, when we close this paint, boom! Completely flat. It ain't going to dry out anytime soon. Now, without even taking a break to wipe the paint off my fingers, I'm going to go straight for the next one, which is an old bronzed flesh. Now, these paints were actually pretty good for not drying up, but it serves as a good example, because you can see it is quite well caked in there. I'm going to try and use the pointed stick this time. Let's see if we can... Yep, you can see this is just coming straight out. I better bring the old tissue back into place so I don't make too much of a mess of this lovely table. Look at that. Just coming straight out. No trouble at all. The good thing about these old pots is that it did keep the paint quite wet, even if it does get wedged in there. So it's usually a little easier to get it out of these ones. The newer pots, for some reason technology has gone backwards when it comes to preventing paint from drying up. I'm not sure whether that's an intentional business decision on the part of the manufacturers to force you to buy paint more quickly. or whether there's some other reason for it, maybe a change in the paint formula, who knows. But you can see that's pretty clean now. There's just a bit of wet paint in there at the moment. Not too much at all though. So you get the idea. So even if that dries and starts crusting up over time, I'm sure I can just dive straight back in there with a knife or a pointed stick and scrape it out. And I've just prolonged the life of that paint by doing so. Especially these ones, because these do have a tendency to dry up, these newer pots. So you really need to be diving in there and cleaning them out regularly if you're finding that paint is getting wedged and dried up in there. If the lid doesn't completely close, then air is getting into the pot and it is slowly drying up, costing you money. And that's no good. So I hope you'll all take this tip on board and start applying it in your own quest to save money in your hobby. Ta-ta for now, ladies and gentlemen.